Good afternoon and welcome to the 90-minute reading block webinar hosted by the Oklahoma Striving Readers.
Click on the picture one time.
Okay. I am Michelle Seybolt. I am the School Improvement and Data Specialist for Oklahoma Striving Readers.
And I'm Sharon Morgan. It's good to be with you today, and I'm the Literacy Specialist for Oklahoma Striving Readers.
And both Sharon and I are very excited that you joined us, and we appreciate that you're with us after a long day at school, I am sure. So we will get started. Our session goals for today are that you will understand the format and structure of an uninterrupted 90-minute reading block, use the cognitive models of reading to plan for instruction, and apply the gradual release model of learning to the 90-minute reading block. And when we say gradual release model to the 90-minute reading block, what we're meaning is that the strategy or skill that you are teaching in whole group becomes incorporated into your small group instruction and then becomes part of your centers and workstations for independent practice. So what is the 90-minute reading block? The National Reading Panel research shows us that all students benefit from a 90-minute reading block of instruction every day. Oklahoma's Reading Sufficiency Act requires a 90-minute reading block in kindergarten through third grade and recommends 90 minutes of reading instruction for upper elementary. In the reading block, there must be systematic instruction in phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. The 90-minute reading block is Tier 1 instruction for all students. Tier 2 students receive intervention time based on needs in addition to the 90-minute reading block. Tier 3 students receive at least 45 to 60 minutes in addition to this 90-minute reading block. The structure of the reading block, there are three components: whole group instruction, small group instruction, and literacy centers or workstations. Small group instruction and literacy centers happen at the same time. In this example, we have whole group reading between 30 and 45 minutes and 45 to 60 minutes of small group and literacy center work. There is a link on this slide to an example of our Tier 1 90-minute reading block. You can access Tier 2 reading block and Tier 3 reading block examples at the Oklahoma State Department of Education website on the RSA page if you would like to see those. When planning for your reading block, other things to take into consideration is where will your whole group instruction happen, where will your small group instruction happen, and how will you arrange your room so that students can work independently in centers and stations. Now we are going to take a look at each of the components of the 90-minute reading block. I did forget to mention at the beginning, if you do have questions, you can type them into the chat box, and we will address those questions at the end of the webinar. As you can see, we have a list of different strategies that you can use in lower and upper elementary. Whole group instruction is meant to introduce new learning explicitly and systematically. This instruction is on grade level, and it is also based on the Oklahoma Academic Standards. Please do not think that if a strategy is not listed under upper elementary that you can't use it. Notice that phonics and phonemic awareness is not listed for upper elementary. That's because those skills need to be taught at the upper elementary and small targeted intervention groups. Also, you might need to use a strategy from lower elementary that is very appropriate in the upper elementary. For example, when teaching figurative language, it would be very good to use a poem and use shared or choral reading with that poem. Also, for your whole group, think of reading as the input and writing as the output. So whatever reading instruction we're putting in, we need to help students put out in the form of writing. This gives them the time to write about their reading and apply strategies. Small group instruction is differentiated in order to reinforce and review skills based on student instructional need. Small groups, to be effective, need to be no more than 6 students. Each group is different and based on student instructional need. Students move in and out of groups based on their need and whether or not the group is a skill-based or a strategy-based small group. Also, students need to be spending at least 65% of the small group lesson engaged in an appropriate leveled text. Literacy centers and workstations. This is where students get the opportunity to practice skills that have been taught during whole group and small group. The center should be authentic and engaging and allow students to use reading as the input and writing as the output. That is a good guiding quote to have in your mind when planning your literacy stations. If reading is their input, what are they doing in literacy centers so that writing is their output? Depending on your centers and your classroom management style, you may want students to work individually, in partnerships, or in small groups. Either way is very appropriate for literacy centers. Anchor centers. I do want to say a special thank you to Miss Ramsey and Ripley. She allowed me to use her workstation chart and a picture of how she organizes workstations in her classroom, and I am very grateful for that. So thank you, Miss Ramsey. I'm going to address anchor centers at the upper elementary level, and then Sharon is going to address them at the primary level. Anchor centers, you teach and model those, and they stay consistent throughout the year, so students are able to work independently, so you are able to do small group instruction. Small group instruction is hard when students are continually interrupting you while you're doing that instruction. So having a procedure set up for students is very important so you can have that uninterrupted time with your small group. In upper grades, you can do several different kinds of centers. For example, for research center, you can pull in other content areas for like science or social studies. For example, in 3rd grade, you could use pictures of the Dust Bowl and have students write about what they're seeing in those. They could write a narrative. They could write an opinion piece just based on those pictures. In 4th grade, students could use atlases in the research center or the reading center, either one, and work independently or in pairs to make a brochure of the current region of the United States they are studying. For science, books could be put out for students to learn about life cycles of different animals, and then they could make a comic strip detailing the life cycle of, let's say, a butterfly. So the anchor centers stay the same. There will always be a reading, writing, research, word work, or listening. But what happens in those centers can sometimes change. Sharon is going to talk about anchor centers at the primary level.
Okay. Thank you so much, Michelle. And again, we want to encourage you, if you have a question, to put it in the chat box. Same thing. So reading center, we always want them to have access to books. Even if we have little friends that are not reading, they can always be looking at pictures. You can make class books so that they can look through them. Writing, I always suggest just multiple types of paper and card and post-it notes if you have them, so they can make lists. You can have little folded books that are blank, so they're writing. It may be pictures or even scribbles if they're small, but that's still part of the writing process. And little ones can still be researching, so you can put the atlases and the maps, the magnifying glasses. They can have an observation book and write down what they see. You can have science materials, leaves, nature, all of those types of things in research. And when I think of word work, I think lots of word sorts. So having pictures, you could even be putting them in groups, like all of the people from the story, all of the things from the story, and those types. If your students are able, they could even sort pictures by the beginning sound or the ending sound if they're not quite ready for actual words yet and listening. I always, this is a great time to introduce higher level vocabularies and let them listen to text that they can't read on their own. You have anything else to add?
I wanted to say that centers are a great place to incorporate other content areas all through the elementary school, but I want to point out that just because you have content area work in those centers, that does not take the place of the time that you teach content area. This is not a time for to introduce new content area strategies, and it's not a time to count that as instruction. This is purely a practice time.
Yes, and we want to always integrate reading, writing, listening, speaking into everything we do. Okay, are we clicking? Okay, so now we've really talked about the essential elements there of the 90-minute reading block. We want to start to wade through what skills you want to be teaching during the 90-minute reading block. Here are the 5 components of reading that have been identified by the National Reading Panel that should be included. So let's break those down. So phonemic awareness is working on individual sounds orally. So there are no letters in this skill. You're doing it orally. Say bat. What's the first sound in bat? Buh. This can be an easy one to skip, but it really sets the foundation for all other skills. So we should see this in the 90-minute reading block. Phonics is where we start connecting the letters with the sounds. There we go. And then fluency, this is reading like we talk, accurately, automatically, and with expression. Generally, if you can read fluently, you've mastered a lot of the phonics and phonemic awareness skills at that point. And then vocabulary, this is word meaning and the concepts that go with the words. And finally, comprehension, which is using strategies to understand and communicate about what you have read. So we want to include those 5 components in our 90-minute reading block. So we'll break this down into some different models of reading, and so you have to bear with us on this simple view of reading because even though we're literacy people, it is written in a multiplication problem. So anyway, so if you look at the simple view of reading, you have the decoding of a text, so being able to sound out the words and figure them out, and then we have that if you multiply the decoding of text with your language comprehension skills, that will equal your ability to gain meaning. So if you think about a multiplication problem, if you have 0 ability to decode text, but you have the ability, you can comprehend language, you're still not going to gain meaning. If you have the ability to decode, but you don't have language comprehension skills, you won't be able to gain meaning. It's the balance of both of those. So you need to have decoding skills and comprehension of language to gain meaning. So we want to make sure, I think sometimes, especially in those early grades, we focus so much on those foundational skills that sometimes we leave out the vocabulary and the background knowledge, but it takes both of those together to gain meaning from a text. So here's another model, Scarborough's rope, which was actually the model that our Oklahoma Academic Standards was based upon. So if you look at the left-hand side, you'll see the simple view of reading. The decoding multiplied by language comprehension equals your reading comprehension. And it breaks down those skills just a little bit more. So at the bottom, you'll see word recognition, the phonological awareness, decoding, and sight word recognition. And those are what we call constrained skills. They're pretty easy to assess. I can pretty simply figure out if a child knows all their letter sounds just by checking them off. And those hopefully will master those by, 3rd through 5th grade, and they become pretty automatic. Now, the ones at the top, the language comprehension skills, those are unconstrained skills. They develop forever, and they tend to be difficult to assess, so we never know all vocabulary. We're always learning those, and we have to be very strategic with those. So when you have an accomplished reader, they don't even have to think about the word recognition piece. They just do that very automatically, and they're always coming back to the language comprehension. What vocabulary do I need to understand? What language structures? If you have a student that's a struggling reader, they tend to spend a little more time in the word recognition part, and so they have a little more trouble with the language comprehension because they're spending so much time thinking about word recognition. So our goal is that they become very automatic with those decoding skills, and so that they can spend their working memory on the language comprehension skills to comprehend text. Okay, so we're going to go to one more model of reading. And this is if you want to see the full webinar for this, it's on our resources page. This was presented by the Center for Enhancing Early Learning Outcomes as a support for states with striving readers. But this is based on the cognitive model of reading. And it puts reading in 3 different strands. So we have the word recognition strand that is building up to fluency. And hopefully if you're fluent, then you have the phonological skills, the print concepts, and decoding and sight word skills that you need to be automatic. And then in the middle, it has the language comprehension. Now, I put this in gray because these are not linear skills. You're always working on all of them. So you're always building vocabulary, you're building background knowledge, you're building knowledge of text and sentence structures. So, for example, it's a narrative text and the type of sentence that are used. And then we have the strategic knowledge, like what are the general purposes for reading? What are the specific purposes, to inform, to entertain, and the strategies that you use to comprehend for reading. So what we want to break down now is what this might look like in each grade level. So I'm going to start with pre-K, and I will just say this may look a little different in your school, and you definitely want to base it on the standards and what your assessments are telling you. But in pre-K, if you look at word recognition, obviously fluency is not, doesn't even make sense here, but you're working on phonological awareness. So words have parts, so I might say something like take the word pen, soul, put them together, make the word pencil. You're talking about print concepts, holding the book the correct way, the cover, the back, turning the pages, where's the title, the author, and initial alphabet knowledge, usually starting with the names of the children. And then language comprehension. So this is pretty much done, this is primarily done orally in pre-K in that you're pointing out vocabulary words, you're doing read alouds, you have exploration, science experiments, purposeful play, so they're building background knowledge that they need to understand. You're reading aloud, you're talking to them about the text. You're modeling the strategic knowledge, but this is not a time for them. They won't master that at this point. They're just watching you. Majority of this is done orally. There should be a lot of oral language going on in pre-K. I will say that their block may look a little bit different. A lot of shared reading, exploration, center time. And I have some questions on sight words in pre-K, so I thought I would address that. Children have to have concept of a word before they can understand sight words. A typical 4-year-old does not have the concept of a word yet, so sight words shouldn't really be an emphasis here. Names would be an emphasis. Environmental print would be some things you're looking for in pre-K. So now as we move on to kindergarten, in the word recognition area, we're moving to phonemic awareness, which is the individual sounds. You're still working on print concepts. And now we want them to have full alphabet knowledge. So that means automatically knowing letter names and sounds. We want to make sure that with these foundational skills that we don't lose sight of the language comprehension piece. So we're still doing read alouds with higher level text. We're exposing them to new words. and giving them experiences that they can build upon when they can connect those experiences to when they're reading. And then again, with the strategic knowledge, this is emerging. You're modeling it, they're watching it, but they're not mastering it at this time. So first grade is where we start assessing fluency. So we're still working on phonemic awareness. Make sure that is a part of your day. Phonics, more sight word knowledge. We're talking about decoding, and they're starting to put that into text and reading fluency. And again, we're still working on vocabulary, background knowledge, text structures. This is still oral pretty much at this time, just kind of depending on how far along the student is in reading. And they're emerging in their knowledge of reading strategies. Again, you're teaching this, but they may not be able to apply it as well as they will be able to later. So you're not assessing the strategic knowledge, but you're definitely modeling it and teaching it. Now, as you go to second grade, this is the first time where all three strands are really represented. So in the automatic word recognition, they have sight word knowledge. You're doing more advanced phonemic awareness, so they're deleting phonemes, they're substituting phonemes. Say the word cat, change the k to a b. Those kinds of things are happening, phonics, and they are becoming more and more fluent in this. And again, we don't ever want to take away the language comprehension. You're talking about vocabulary, background knowledge. I think of this as being the content areas. We're talking about, science and that type, and social studies, and using all different types of text. Second graders are really starting to realize that, generally reading is used to get information. They're starting to understand that these pieces are to inform, these are narratives, and they're starting to apply those reading strategies. And then as we get into the upper grades, we should see fluency. If a student is reading fluent, then we can kind of assume that they have the phonemic awareness and phonics skills that they need. There are some advanced phonics skills that you want to teach in the upper grades, such as word parts in meetings, roots, affixes, but generally your phonics and phonemic awareness are in interventions. So if you're assessing them and noticing that they're having difficulty in fluency, you want to dig in a little deeper to that. Vocabulary, background knowledge, they're still exploring text structures. They may be doing this more independently, being able to research on their own. And they are applying strategies for reading. They understand the different purposes. So that just gives you an overview of what you might be looking for at each grade level. It is very important that we're building these skills throughout the elementary years. So we wanted to talk about what this looks like. So Michelle did a great job of talking about the components of the 90-minute block. I went through what skills we need to see. So what does that look like altogether? So for the primary, let's say I'm talking about rhyming words. So that's a phonemic awareness skill. They're manipulating the first sound. In a whole group, I might say the words and have the students respond. So do these words rhyme, thumbs up or thumbs down? Another activity that I've done is I've passed out picture cards, and I've had students partner up with the person the cards rhyme. And then they'll sit down and then they'll name the words. So that would be a whole group instruction for rhyming. Now, small group, you want to select a strategy based on the needs of the students. So I'm going to differentiate more here. So for example, I might have one group, they're just identifying rhyming pairs. Do these rhyme? Bat, cat, yes, no. That would be an activity. You might have another group producing rhyming words. So maybe they've moved on from identifying the pairs, and you can give them a word, and then they tell me other words that rhyme with it. You might also even get a little higher and give them 3 words, and they have to figure out which word does not rhyme with the other 2. It's a higher level skill just based on your students. And then as far as the centers or the stations, they could have a station where they're matching or sorting rhyming picture cards. You could have them listen to a story in the listening center that has a predictable rhyming pattern. You could have rhyming books in the Reading Center. Those would be ways that you could take that one skill and apply it in all different areas of your reading block.
So in the intermediate grades, I know a lot of schools are using different textbook companies for their reading instruction. I know several of them have a graphic organizer that they use every week. It's a different graphic organizer based on the skill that is being taught that week. So what I would do with that is use that graphic organizer in whole group. Then I would use it in small group with text that match what my students need in a leveled text. And then I would take that same graphic organizer, let's say main idea in detail, for example. I'm going to use that same graphic organizer, and I'm going to have students use that possibly to reread a section of the social studies text that they just read the day before in social studies. If it's main idea in detail, I might put that in the writing center as well. So it becomes a scaffold for students to write for me. So they would fill in their main idea, their details, and use that to construct some kind of piece of writing. So that graphic organizer that is used that week to teach that specific strategy or skill, I would incorporate it into all of my instruction and make sure that students are able to use that successfully independently in centers and workstations.
Okay, and again, if you have any questions for us, go ahead and put in the chat box. Here are some of the resources that we used in putting this together that may be helpful for you. Guided Reading Part 1, the Fountains and Pinnell book about guiding readers and writers. Here's a Reading Rockets article, and then this Preparing for the Striving Readers program, that has some more information about that cognitive model of reading. It also is a great webinar. It has some information about assessment and those types of things if you get a chance.
All right, we are open for questions. If you have a question, just send it to us in the chat box. We're happy to answer that. We'll give you just a few minutes to do that.
And if you think of some questions later, here is our contact information. Please feel free to call us or email us with a question, or if you need some resources, you're noticing that your teachers are struggling in an area, we can definitely pull resources. We can come out and see you if you're a Striving Reader School and do some professional development.
Absolutely. Oh. Okay, the first question we have is, will this presentation be available for future rebroadcast at sites for professional learning? Yes, we will email this webinar to you. We have your email information because you registered, so we can absolutely get that to you. If you are an O-Circle school, we will put this link in our December newsletter, and we will also send it to you as well.
Yes, we can do the slides as well. We'll do the recording and the slides.
Okay, any more questions?
All right, well, thank you all for being here this afternoon. We do know that you probably had a long day at school and it is right before a holiday. So if there's anything we can do for you, please don't hesitate to let us know, and thank you again.
Thank you.